If you're on your healing journey and you have heard about trauma and you are wondering if you need to do some trauma processing, some trauma integration, some trauma healing work on your healing journey to help you move along in the direction that you want to go in and experiences the changes that you desire. This video is my trauma in a nutshell presentation that I gave to my counselling cohort last year, because counsellors aren't actually taught about trauma and the effects of trauma until much later, until after they are qualified counsellors. It's an additional level where we do separate trauma training. However, I have done trauma training with Embody Lab on my clinical EFT course and also as part of my breathwork qualification. So I feel like I am qualified to share my knowledge and experience and what I have learned with others in this very basic introductory manner. So I hope that this makes it simple and easy for you to understand and relate to, so that you can identify, oh, I've got some trauma work that I would like to look at and get support for. So I'm going to share this presentation. Trauma in a nutshell. First of all, as a trauma-informed, trained practitioner, before I give a presentation on trauma, it's important that I explain that it's very normal that just by simply hearing the word trauma or discussing its effects, it can actually stir up some discomfort inside us, some activation inside us. It can bring up strong emotions and sensations in our body, even when it's not about us, and also when it is about us, and that is completely normal. So with that in mind, I want to invite you to consider doing some grounding exercises. And remember that you can pause this video at any time and you can process it little by little. We call this titration, where we're just learning little by little to allow our nervous system in order to feel safe and take on board and process the information that we are learning, especially when it is something so significant like this. So a couple of grounding exercises that you can do is you can gently push one foot into the floor and then the other. Another great grounding exercise actually is holding a cushion and having a cushion on your lap and putting your arms around it. You can also take a few moments to look around the space that you are in, just gently scanning the room, observing where you see textures and light and pattern, and colors and shadows, etc. You could also do something like naming 3 things out aloud. So it might be your refrigerator, a glass on the table, and a sofa throw. And you can also notice today's date as well. So having your phone nearby and realizing what date we are in, because if we do experience any kind of sensations that are related to trauma, then we want to be aware that we are now in the present moment, and right here, right now, we are okay. Feel free to practice some of these for as long as you want before you watch this video. Disclaimer: this presentation is based on my professional study and lived experience. It's informed by my certifications in evidence-based trauma-informed clinical EFT, integrative somatic trauma therapy that I did via the Embody Lab, and my CPCAB breathwork coaching certificate. And also me working with clients that have both developmental and acute trauma, and my own personal journey of trauma recovery as well. None of this in this video is medical advice or a substitute for therapy, and none of it is a diagnosis either. It's just my experience and me sharing what I've learned. So take what resonates, explore it. Feel free to ask questions in the comments below, or ask another coach or a practitioner, a counselor, a therapist about trauma as well, and say, I watched this presentation and I think some of this might relate to me. What do you think? And it might do, and it might not. This presentation is here to help give you some guidance about exploring this question for yourself, and nothing more. So why we should learn about trauma. This is actually for other counselors. Just at the moment, we're living in a time with such shared distress, cost of living, climate change, systemic racism, all different types of human rights that are going on. Wars are really present in the media, and we're constantly exposed to different types of suffering. Many people also have symptoms of ill mental health, which are in fact caused by trauma. And understanding trauma is also the key to giving safe, effective therapeutical work. As I mentioned, this is a presentation that I was giving to other counselors because we do not learn trauma-informed practice until level 5, which is actually on our 5th year of study. That to me seems ludicrous because I think anybody that is in a counseling position, a position of supporting and helping other people work through their most challenging events, needs to be informed about how trauma shows up in different mental, emotional, and physical states, so that they can really help to support the client in those moments as they're processing what they've experienced. And it can show up very physically as well when people go to therapy. Sometimes people might be talking about a particular experience and they might experience some shakiness, a change in body temperature, nausea. They may disassociate and not really be in their body at the moment, and cry and become very dysregulated. And it could simply be because their body is remembering some traumatic experiences from the past. So without this lens, counselors, helpers, therapists may also feel distressed and overlook a client's needs for regulation and safety in that moment and beyond. We also need to talk about the scope of trauma because it is extremely complex and a multifaceted term that spans from actually very ordinary to extreme experiences, which I'm going to go onto in a moment. And it's a relatively new and emerging field of psychology, and our formal understanding and healing approaches are still evolving when we talk about trauma. And I've listed some key practitioners here that you can research more about if you would like. So what is trauma? The Oxford Dictionary will say that trauma is a deeply distressing experience or physical injury. Now, that experience can be something that happens on the outside in our external environment, but that experience can actually also be something that happens on the inside, our internal experience, how we perceive what is also happening on the outside. And there are many different types of trauma, and this is not an extensive list. This is just an introductory list of different types of trauma. So we have acute, which is one-time events, chronic, which is repeated long-term exposure to traumatic events, complex and developmental trauma, which happens predominantly in childhood, generational and intergenerational trauma, so traumas that are passed on from our grandparents to our parents, to us, to our children. Vicarious trauma and secondary trauma is also something that we are really easily exposed to. Vicarious trauma is when we witness violence or harm to somebody else other than us, or something else other than us. And we can even get vicarious trauma by watching things like horror movies. Racial and cultural trauma, violent trauma, sexual, domestic, war-related, it goes on, chemical, medical trauma. There are many, many different ways that we can experience trauma, as you can also see in this illustration on the side. So trauma isn't just one thing. Most people think of trauma as the act. So they think of trauma, and most people think of it as a significant act. So something like somebody experiencing physical abuse, or being in a motor car accident, or being present during a natural disaster. These are actually examples of acute traumatic situations. But trauma can result from a much wider range of situations and experiences. So a really good way to understand trauma is that it's through these two core categories of traumatic experience, which is number one, too much, too fast, and number two, too little for too long. So first of all, and neither of these are more important than the other, but too much, too fast, or too soon. These are overwhelming events that happen faster than we could process, leaving us feeling shocked, frozen, and stuck in high alert. So examples, so this also relates to that acute trauma that I spoke about a moment ago. Examples are car accidents, sudden loss, physical or sexual assault, medical emergencies, war or natural disasters, panic attacks, witnessing violence, or any other experience that flooded our system without adequate time or support for us to recover from it. And this is a type of trauma that overwhelms the nervous system. So you can think of it as too much voltage blowing out a light bulb. Next is too little for too long. This is more complicated. These are chronic patterns of neglect, unmet needs, and disconnection. And this is especially prevalent for many people during their early development, so during their childhood years, but it can also happen after that in our teenage years. It can happen or in any of our years, actually. This is not really about the event that happened either, but it's also about what didn't happen. So the connection you didn't receive, the safety that you didn't get, the nurturing, nourishing, loving care that you needed that wasn't present, the base physiological needs that weren't available. Go back to the presentation. Examples of this look like a lack of emotional attunement or affection from caregivers, chronic emotional neglect, being left alone to deal with overwhelming emotions, growing up in chaotic households, never feeling safe or seen and never being soothed, living in long-term poverty or in social isolation, and having to suppress our authentic needs, feelings, and identity in order to survive. This type of trauma leaves the nervous system almost malnourished and kind of underdeveloped, often leading to a lack of internal safety, connection, or a sense of self. And so you can think of this as being too little voltage running through the wire to the light bulb, and it can't actually properly connect to the light. So that you can imagine that there's just not enough life force, there's not enough energy, there's not enough connection and care and nourishment going into the nervous system. So it's depleted, it's drained, it's strained. A really fantastic quote that explains what trauma is by Gabor Mate. Trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you of a result of what happened to you. And I just want to explain a little bit about what makes an experience traumatic. So this completely depends on a person's internal state, their nervous system capacity and resilience at the time of an event. And if they had access to safety, connection, and resources after the event. So I've got an example here of 2 glasses of water. This is going to explain, hopefully, how the same situation can affect 2 people differently. So on one side, we can see we've got an empty glass, and you can imagine this empty glass is the nervous system that is depleted of. No, it's not that. This is the nervous system of someone that doesn't have a lot of stress in their system at the moment. So maybe they've got all their base physiological needs that have been met. They have got a good job, some expendable income. They are able to take vacations. They've got a loving and caring family and partner. They eat well. They have access to enjoy their hobbies and get outside in nature. They don't have so much stress already inside their nervous system. So they've got a lot of capacity in their cup. The next person, however, you can imagine that they, maybe grew up in a more difficult environment. Maybe their caregivers weren't always present and they weren't present physically or emotionally as much as what they needed. Perhaps they are unemployed at the moment and worried about meeting ends meet and putting food on the table. And perhaps that they, are struggling to imagine a good outcome for their future right now. Their glass is full of stress at the moment. Now, these 2 people could be on a road, walking down a street, and both of them could witness the same event. Let's say it's a car accident. And feel free to skip this bit if you feel activated, if I say that, and do some of those grounding activities. But this is just an example. And one person, they both feel very upset by that event, but one person, the person with no stress already in their cup, in their nervous system, is able to go home and share that experience with a loved one and, talk it through with people, and they're able to come to baseline. The other person, however, doesn't have anybody to talk to and is already extremely stressed. And the stress of witnessing a very upsetting event has put more stress on their system. And now their cup is overflowing with stress. And it is at the point that the cup is overflowing with stress. Too much stress has gone into the system. They've witnessed something which has been extremely upsetting. And in this case, it's been traumatic for them, even though it wasn't for the other person. Their cup has overflowed. Their nervous system has reached capacity, like that light bulb where there's too much electricity and it's kind of burnt out. And this is why, if we go back and think about what Gabor Mate said, is that it's not the event, it's what happens inside of you as a result of the event. And also it's, as I say here, it depends on what happens after the event. So do you have access to safety, connection, and resources after the event as well? Because a lot of people don't have that, and that is what causes this overload to our nervous system and pushes us into this survival state and having a dysregulated nervous system due to the trauma that is in our nervous system at the time of the event. So I know that that's a lot of information to take in, but to simplify, if you've heard this term before, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's the fact trauma happens when it's that last thing that just overwhelms the system to the point that it becomes dysregulated and stuck in survival mode. Now, there are lots and lots of different ways that we can work through healing trauma, of course. But these are the consequences of unprocessed trauma. And so there are emotional, mental, and somatic physical consequences. Things like chronic anxiety and panic, depression, irritability or rage, shame and guilt, fear of intimacy, emotional flashbacks. Mental consequences can include negative self-beliefs, intrusive thoughts, difficulty concentrating, overthinking and hypervigilance, being disconnected from reality and having a lot of difficulty in making decisions. And somatic consequences include having tension and pain, chronic fatigue, sleep disturbances, gut issues, breath constriction, autoimmune flares, feeling startled, and also having the inability to speak about what has happened. This is not an extensive list of all the, the consequences of unprocessed trauma. This is the consequences in a nutshell. This is an introduction. By all means, if you have got some symptoms or any questions and you want to pop them in the comments below and share those with me, I will do my best to get back to you and see if what you're experiencing aligns with what I'm talking about. So this is a great illustration from Juliet Young about how the body keeps the score. And so this is all about those somatic experiences that we can, those somatic consequences that we can experience off the back of experiencing trauma, either that acute short-term too much too soon, or those long-term chronic neglect, traumatic experiences that people can have. So digestive issues, chronic pain, palpitating hearts, feeling disassociated, headaches, immune system issues, seeking food, craving food for comfort, having nervous twitches, etc. It can show up in many, many, many different ways. So there are different healing approaches for too much too soon. I've got a couple of examples here. So what helps is if we've got too much too soon, then it helps do body up regulation. So starting with the body and then working towards the mind. If you've experienced overwhelming events that have been related to accidents, violence or betrayal, etc., this is, again, not an extensive list, but some of these practices, not some, exploring a variety of these practices is really helpful. Like not one is going to help alleviate everything that you might be experiencing as a consequence of what you could have gone through. But this is a solid list, I believe, of different things that I would do and that I've recommended my clients to do and things that I've done with my clients as well. And then healing from too little for too long. What really helps with this is relational work. So actually building a relationship with a practitioner. So having a trusted practitioner that you can work with over a longer period of time, that you can co-regulate with and build trust and comfort with. And so this can look like, doing embodied person-centered counseling, like what I do, exploring parts work, doing co-regulation based touch therapy and body work, attachment-based therapies, a lot of compassion focused and self-worth work, building that internal safety through nurturing relationships. And it is the relationship with the counselor, the practitioner, the therapist that becomes so critically important for people that are looking to heal from this type of trauma, and to help people gradually expand their window of tolerance. I will be making another video on that, on the window of tolerance soon. And Like I said a moment ago, it's not just one thing to explore. In my personal healing journey, and also with the healing journey that I help my clients, support my clients through, it is so holistic. We cannot just do one thing typically that is going to eradicate our symptoms and help us feel the way that we want to feel. It requires mental, emotional, and social support, in changes to our environment, our physical health, our lifestyle choices, doing complementary therapy, getting individualized care, but also community care is really important as well. And resting, preventing things from happening, preventing ourselves from being in further situations that could cause dysregulation, building a much better mind-body connection, exploring spirituality, if that's something that you're interested in. Healing or integrating trauma requires a really holistic approach and patience and compassion. And so that is it for this presentation on trauma in a nutshell. My name is Donna Louise, and I am a trauma-trained somatic practitioner, functional breathwork coach, clinical EFT practitioner, and I'm a trainee counselor. And I help people to get out of survival mode, to restore their nervous system, and to reconnect with themselves again. Please, if you've found this video beneficial, give it a like, share any comments, any questions. I would love to hear from you, and reach out if you are looking for that one-to-one support. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.